The fluorescent lights of Seoul National University's lecture hall buzzed overhead as I stared at the failing grade marked in red across my economics midterm. 42%. In my previous life, this would have devastated me. Now it filled me with a cold satisfaction. My name is Kira Metler, and I died at 23, betrayed, broken, and alone. But fate gave me an impossible gift, a second chance. I woke up on my 18th birthday, back in my dorm room, with all my memories intact. The naive girl who once trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone who understood the true nature of the world, and the true nature of Nova Stetter. I glanced across the lecture hall where Nova sat, her perfectly manicured fingers frantically checking her phone. Her face had gone pale. She'd just received notification of her own failing grade. Of course she had. After all, we were connected by something far more sinister than friendship. In my first life, I thought Nova was my salvation. When my adoptive parents died in that car crash during our freshman year, leaving me with nothing but debt, Nova appeared like an angel. She introduced me to an old woman in Myeongdong's backstreets, someone who dealt in spiritual contracts. The crone had explained that the jade medallion she offered could balance fortunes between two people, that Nova, born into wealth but cursed with poor health and bad luck, could share her family's prosperity with me in exchange for sharing my strong constitution and good fortune. I was so desperate, so grateful to Nova for thinking of me, that I signed without reading the fine print written in archaic Korean characters I couldn't understand. The medallion worked exactly as promised, but not how I thought. Nova didn't share her wealth with me. She gradually took everything that was mine. My academic achievements became hers. My part-time job opportunities vanished, while identical ones appeared for her. Even the boy I'd fallen in love with, Min Junho, slowly began to notice Nova instead of me. By our senior year, I was failing classes that Nova was acing. I was turned down for jobs that Nova landed effortlessly. I watched helplessly as my life force seemed to drain away, while Nova glowed with vitality I recognize as my own. The final betrayal came at graduation. Junho, wearing a suit I'd helped him pick out for our planned celebration dinner, instead knelt before Nova with a ring. I stood in the shadows, watching the love of my life propose to my best friend, using words I'd written in love letters Nova had somehow intercepted and claimed as her own thoughts. That night, I confronted Nova in her family's penthouse apartment, the apartment that should have been mine if the medallion had worked as she'd promised. She didn't deny anything. Instead, she laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "Did you really think I'd share my inheritance with some orphaned scholarship student?" she asked, sipping wine from a crystal glass. "The medallion doesn't create balance, Kira. It creates the complete transfer. Everything you were, everything you could have been, it's mine now. Even Junho will never remember that he loved you first." I lunged for the medallion around her neck, but she pulled out a knife. In the struggle, I was the one who ended up bleeding out on her marble floor, watching her call the police with tears in her eyes, playing the victim perfectly. "She attacked me," Nova sobbed into the phone, stepping carefully around my spreading blood. "My best friend, I don't understand why." Those were the last words I heard before everything went dark. But here I was, 18 again, sitting in the same lecture hall where my first life had begun to unravel. This time I knew exactly what Nova was planning. This time I would be the one pulling the strings. I deliberately failed every assignment, every exam, every quiz. My professors were bewildered. My entrance exam scores had been among the highest in the university's history, but I played the part perfectly, a grieving orphan overwhelmed by loss, unable to focus on studies. Nova, meanwhile, was panicking. She'd already given me the jade medallion 3 months ago, right after my parents' funeral, with the same tearful speech about wanting to help her beloved friend. She expected my academic excellence to transfer to her, but instead, she was failing alongside me. "Kira, what's wrong with you lately?" Nova cornered me after our disastrous midterm results were posted. Her designer handbag, purchased with money that should have been paying for her family's mounting medical bills, trembled in her grip. "You used to be so studious. Are you on drugs?" I let my eyes fill with tears, a skill I'd perfected in my previous life. "I can't concentrate since the accident. Everything reminds me of them. Maybe I should just drop out." "No." Nova's response was too quick, too desperate. "You can't drop out. Your parents would want you to succeed. I'll help you study. We'll get through this together. What she really meant was, I need your academic ability to transfer to me, and if you drop out, the medallion stops working. And I pretended to be comforted by her words, letting her guide me to the library where she made a show of tutoring me. But I'd already learned all this material years ago. The Mettler family business empire hadn't been built by ignorance. My adoptive parents had groomed me from childhood to inherit their conglomerate, ensuring I received the finest education money could buy. University was just a formality, a chance to network and establish my public image. In my first life, I'd been too traumatized by their sudden death to remember most of what they taught me. This time, every lesson came flooding back with perfect clarity. While Nova struggled through basic economics principles, I was mentally reviewing advanced corporate law and international finance strategies I'd learned from private tutors at age 15. But I made sure my test answers reflected none of that knowledge. I just can't remember anything, I whimpered, letting Nova see my blank practice worksheets. It's like there's fog in my brain. She patted my shoulder with false sympathy, but I caught the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. In my first life, this was exactly when my grades had started to slip. She thought everything was going according to plan. If only she knew that I was already planning phase 2. Seoul National University Hospital's pediatric ward always smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I'd started volunteering there 1 month into the semester, claiming I needed meaningful activity to help with my grief. Nova thought it was a healthy outlet. She had no idea it was reconnaissance. That's where I first saw him, a small boy, maybe 7 years old, lying in a bed that seemed to swallow his tiny frame. His name was David Prestel, and he was dying. The nurses spoke in hushed whispers about his condition, a rare genetic disease that was slowly shutting down his organs. His father visited every day, a man with prematurely gray hair and eyes that held the weight of impending loss. Jason Prestel. I recognized the name from business journals. He was the CEO of Prestel Technologies, one of Korea's largest electronics manufacturers. But here he was just a father, watching his only child fade away. My wife died giving birth to him. He told one of the doctors during a conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear. David is all I have left of her. If he dies, he couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I understood loss. I understood the desperate measures people would take to prevent it. David was perfect for what I needed, an innocent child whose life was already hanging by a thread, from a family with enough resources to handle the chaos that would follow. If my plan worked, David would recover completely. If it failed, he would simply continue on his current trajectory, which meant I wasn't really risking anything except accelerating a process already in motion. I spent weeks building a relationship with the boy. During my volunteer hours, I would sit by his bed and read him stories, always careful to time my visits when his father wasn't around. David was remarkably bright despite his illness, with a quick wit and gentle humor that reminded me painfully of my adoptive father. "You're different from the other volunteers," he told me one afternoon, his small hand wrapped around my finger with surprising strength. "You don't look at me like I'm already dead." "That's because you're not going to die," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Finding the old woman again required patience and careful investigation. She operated from the same narrow alley in Myeongdong, but her location shifted every few weeks to avoid authorities. I finally tracked her down through a network of fortune tellers and herb sellers, following whispered rumors and half-remembered directions. Her shop was exactly as I remembered. Cramped shelves lined with mysterious bottles, the air thick with incense and secrets. She looked up when I entered, her ancient eyes surprisingly sharp in a face mapped with wrinkles. "You're not ready for another contract," she said before I could speak. "The first one is still active." I pulled the jade medallion from beneath my shirt. Nova had given it to me with such ceremony, explaining how it would help balance our fortunes during this difficult time. Even the memory of my younger self's gratitude made me sick. "I want to transfer this to someone else," I said. "Someone who needs good fortune more than I do." The crone's eyes narrowed. "That's not how it works. The contract is bound by blood and intention. You cannot simply give it away." "Then what if the person I give it to doesn't know what it is? What if they just think it's a gift?" A slow, cunning smile spread across her weathered face. "Ah, that might work. If the recipient accepts the medallion willingly, and if their need is greater than your own, the contract might recognize a new primary beneficiary. But there are risks." "What risks?" If the transfer fails, the backlash could kill you. And if it succeeds, she leaned forward, her breath smelling of herbs and decay. The original contract holder, your friend, she will bear the consequences of whatever fate you're trying to escape. Are you prepared for that responsibility? I thought of Nova's knife sliding between my ribs, of Junho's forgotten love, of the life she'd stolen so callously. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. David's condition worsened in late November. His father started sleeping in the hospital, running his company via phone calls from the corridor outside the pediatric ICU. I watched Jason Prestel slowly dissolve, transforming from a powerful CEO into a broken man clinging to hope that grew thinner each day. The doctors were talking about experimental treatments in Switzerland, procedures that might buy David a few more months, but couldn't cure the underlying genetic decay. Jason had already liquidated half his assets to fund previous treatments. He would spend his entire fortune and sacrifice his company if it meant saving his son. I could see it in his desperate eyes. That's when I made my move. I approached David during one of his father's brief absences. The boy was barely conscious, but he smiled when he saw me. "Did you bring a new story today, Miss Kira?" Instead of a book, I pulled out the jade medallion. Under the harsh hospital lights, it looked innocuous, just a small carved disc on a silk cord. Nothing that suggested it held the power to reshape reality. "I brought you something special," I said, fastening the cord around his thin neck. "My grandmother gave this to me before she died. She said it would bring good luck to whoever wore it." It wasn't entirely a lie. My adoptive grandmother had given me jewelry before her death, though nothing quite like this. David's fingers closed around the medallion with surprising strength. "It's warm," he whispered, wonder touching his voice. "That's how you know the luck is working," I told him. Within hours, something changed. David's fever broke for the first time in weeks. His breathing became easier. When Jason returned from his meeting with yet another specialist, he found his son sitting up in bed, asking for food. The doctors called it a temporary rally, common in terminal cases, they said. A brief improvement before the final decline. But I knew better. I could feel it in my bones, a sense of something shifting in the cosmic balance that governed our lives. The medallion was choosing a new master. Nova's decline began subtly. She started getting headaches during our study sessions, complaining of dizziness that the campus health center couldn't explain. Her perfect skin developed a grayish pallor that expensive cosmetics couldn't quite hide. "I think I'm coming down with something," she told me, unconsciously touching her throat where her own jade medallion, the control piece that allowed her to direct the main medallion's power, rested beneath her cashmere sweater. I made appropriate sympathetic noises while internally cataloging every symptom. In my first life, these were the exact signs that had preceded my own decline, though I'd been too naive to recognize them as supernatural in origin. Meanwhile, David's recovery accelerated beyond all medical explanation. His doctors ran test after test, finding that his previously failing organs were not only stabilizing, but actually improving. The genetic markers that should have guaranteed his death were becoming less prominent with each blood draw. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Kim told Jason during a consultation I observed from the hallway. "We've seen temporary improvements before, but nothing like this. It's as if his entire genetic code is being rewritten." Jason didn't question the miracle. He was too grateful to look for explanations. But I noticed how he began asking the nurses about David's care, trying to identify what might have changed. Someone had helped his son, and he was determined to find them. I made sure to vary my volunteer schedule, never visiting when Jason might be around. The last thing I needed was for him to connect David's recovery to my presence. By December, Nova was spending more time in the campus medical center than in class. Her family's wealth couldn't buy answers for symptoms that had no medical cause. She grew thin and wan, her designer clothes hanging loose on a frame that seemed to shrink daily. Our professors were baffled by our continued academic struggles. Both of us were failing every course, despite coming from families known for producing high achievers. Emergency tutoring sessions did nothing to improve our grades. How could they, when the knowledge was being drained away as fast as we acquired it? "I don't understand what's happening to us," Nova whispered during one of our library sessions, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "It's like we're both cursed." If she only knew how literally accurate that assessment was. The jade medallion around David's neck grew brighter each day, though only I seemed to notice. The warm glow was visible even through his hospital gown, pulsing in rhythm with his strengthening heartbeat. Whatever force had been slowly killing him was now flowing in reverse, carrying away his illness and replacing it with vibrant health. But energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. David's recovery was coming at Nova's expense. Just as my first life's decline had fueled her success, the difference was that David deserved the gift he was receiving. Jason Prestel's investigation into his son's miracle recovery was more thorough than I'd anticipated. He'd hired private investigators to identify everyone who'd had contact with David during the critical period when his health had begun to improve. It was only a matter of time before they traced the connection back to me. I was in David's room, reading him a story about brave knights and defeated dragons, when Jason walked in unexpectedly. Our eyes met across his son's bed, and I saw the moment of recognition flicker across his features. "You're the volunteer," he said quietly, "the one who's been reading to David." "I volunteer with several children," I replied carefully, closing the book. "David is one of my favorites. The nurses say you were here the day his condition started improving. You gave him something, a necklace." David's hand instinctively moved to the jade medallion, still hidden beneath his pajama top. "Miss Kira gave me a good luck charm from her grandmother," he said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "It's been working really well." Jason's eyes sharpened with interest. He was a businessman, trained to identify cause and effect patterns. In his mind, I had given his son some kind of talisman, and his son had recovered. The logical conclusion was that I possessed knowledge or resources that could explain the medical miracle. "I'd like to speak with you privately," Jason said, "if you don't mind." I did mind, actually. The last thing I needed was a powerful CEO investigating my background too closely. But refusing would only make him more suspicious. "Of course," I said, giving David's hand a gentle squeeze. "I'll see you tomorrow, okay?" Jason led me to a private conference room typically used for family consultations. Through the windows, Seoul's skyline glittered in the winter twilight, a reminder of the vast fortune and influence at his disposal. "My son was dying," he said without preamble. "Every doctor, every specialist, every experimental treatment, nothing worked. Then you started visiting him, and suddenly he's recovering beyond all medical explanation. I need to know what you did." I chose my words carefully. "I didn't do anything except spend time with him. Sometimes that's all a sick child needs, someone who believes they'll get better." "Don't insult my intelligence," Jason replied, though his tone remained respectful. "I've built my company by recognizing patterns others miss. David's recovery began exactly when you gave him that medallion. I've researched similar cases. There are documented instances of objects carrying what some might call supernatural properties." And my heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. "You believe in magic, Mr. Prestel?" "I believe in results," he said, "and I believe in gratitude. Whatever you did, however you did it, you saved my son's life. Name your price." This was dangerous territory. Jason Prestel had resources that could uncover my true identity, my family's hidden fortune, even my connection to Nova. But he also represented an opportunity I hadn't anticipated. "I don't want money," I said, "but I may need a favor someday, something that requires influence and discretion." He studied my face with the intensity of a man accustomed to reading opponents across boardroom tables. "You're not what you appear to be, are you, miss?" "Kira Mettler," I supplied, deciding that partial honesty was safer than elaborate lies. His eyes widened slightly. "Mettler, as in Mettler Industries? I thought that family line ended with the car accident last year." "Not ended," I corrected. "Interrupted." Understanding dawned in his expression. Here was another CEO's heir, temporarily brought low by tragedy, who had somehow found the means to save his dying child. The logic appealed to his business-minded worldview, powerful people helping each other through mutual benefit. "Consider my favor guaranteed," he said, extending his hand. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it." As we shook hands, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. I now had the backing of one of Korea's most influential businessmen, and he didn't even know why he'd given it to me. More importantly, David was recovering, Nova was declining, and my revenge was proceeding exactly according to plan. Spring semester brought the culmination of everything I'd orchestrated. David was discharged from the hospital in March, his genetic disease completely in remission. The medical journals were calling it the most remarkable recovery in pediatric oncology history. Nova, meanwhile, was barely functional. She'd lost 30 pounds, her hair was falling out in clumps, and she spent most of her time in bed, too weak to attend classes. Her family's resources were now devoted to finding a cure for her mysterious illness, while David's family celebrated their miracle. The jade medallion around David's neck had grown so bright that I could see it glowing even through thick clothing. The transfer was nearly complete. All of Nova's stolen fortune, health, and success was flowing to someone who truly deserved it. But I wanted more than just poetic justice. I wanted Nova to understand what she'd done to me. I visited her in the private hospital room her family had rented, carrying flowers and wearing an expression of deep concern. She looked terrible, skin like parchment, eyes sunken in dark hollows, breathing labored and painful. "Kira," she whispered, managing a weak smile. "You're so sweet to visit. The doctors still can't figure out what's wrong with me." "Maybe it's the same thing that was wrong with me," I suggested gently. "Do you remember that medallion you gave me after my parents died? The one from the old woman in Myeongdong?" A flicker of fear passed through her eyes. "What about it? Turns out that woman isn't just a fortune teller. She deals in contracts that can transfer life force between people." "The medallion you gave me wasn't meant to help me, Nova. It was meant to steal everything I had and give it to you." Her face went completely white. That's impossible. You're talking about magic?" "The same magic that's been slowly killing you for the past 6 months," I continued, my voice gentle but implacable. "You see, I gave that medallion to someone else, a little boy who was dying in the children's hospital. And just like the contract says, everything flows to whoever needs it most." Nova tried to sit up, but she was too weak. You can't prove any of this." "I don't need to prove it," I said, pulling out my phone to show her pictures of David playing in the hospital courtyard, rosy-cheeked and laughing. "The results speak for themselves. David is completely healthy now. His father thinks I'm some kind of angel for saving his son's life." The truth was finally sinking in. Nova's eyes filled with tears of rage and despair. "You planned this, all of it, the failing grades, the volunteering." "I planned my revenge," I corrected. "Just like you planned to steal my life. The difference is that my victim actually deserves to be saved." "Please," she whispered, grasping my hand with fingers like brittle twigs. "Please take it back. I'll give you everything, my family's money, the apartment, even Junho. Just make it stop." I looked down at her with the same cold satisfaction she'd shown when I bled out on her floor. "You know what you called me in my first life, Nova? You said the medallion doesn't create balance. It creates complete transfer. Everything you were, everything you could have been, belongs to David now." I stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Nova, in case you're wondering, Junho never loved you. The medallion made him forget that he loved me. But I remember everything. When you die, that spell will break too. He'll remember who he really wanted to marry." Her scream of anguish followed me down the hospital corridor, but I felt only peace. Nova Stetter died on a rainy Thursday in April, her body finally succumbing to the same mysterious wasting illness that had baffled her doctors. The funeral was small and sad. Her family's fortune had been depleted by medical bills, and most of her friends had drifted away as she became too sick to maintain her social connections. I attended, of course, playing the role of the grieving best friend one final time. But inside, I felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. David's recovery was complete by then. The jade medallion had grown dim, its work finished. All of Nova's stolen life force now flowed through him, ensuring that he would grow up healthy, brilliant, and blessed with the kind of fortune that opens every door. The day after the funeral, Junho called me. "Kira?" His voice was confused, distant, like someone waking from a long dream. I had the strangest feeling at Nova's service. Like I was supposed to be there with you, not as her boyfriend, but as something else. Do you know what I mean? The medallion's spell was indeed breaking. Junho's suppressed memories were beginning to surface, along with all the feelings Nova had stolen from him. "I know exactly what you mean," I said. "Would you like to have coffee tomorrow? I think we have a lot to talk about." 2 weeks later, Jason Prestel requested a private meeting. We met at an upscale cafe in Gangnam, where he looked like any other businessman conducting a routine negotiation. Only his eyes betrayed the depth of his gratitude. "David's doctors say he's not just cured. He's actually healthier than most children his age, he reported. His genetic markers suggest he'll live a long, successful life. Whatever you did, however you did it, my debt to you is permanent. I told you I might need a favor someday, I reminded him. Name it. I slid a business proposal across the table, a detailed plan for revitalizing Mettler Industries, using a combination of David's family's technology patents and my own inherited resources. With Jason's backing and connections, I could rebuild my adoptive parents' empire stronger than ever. I want to honor their memory by completing what they started, I explained. But I'll need a partner with your level of influence and expertise. He barely glanced at the documents before extending his hand. Consider it done. When do we start? The corporate headquarters of Mettler Prestel Technologies gleamed in the sole sunshine, 50 floors of glass and steel that housed one of Asia's most successful electronics conglomerates. My office on the top floor offered a panoramic view of the city, where I'd died and been reborn. At 28, I was one of Korea's youngest female CEOs. My success stories splashed across magazine covers and business profiles. The media loved the narrative. Orphaned heiress overcomes tragedy to rebuild her family's empire, guided by the wisdom of her late parents and supported by strategic partnerships with other industry leaders. They had no idea how literally accurate that story was. Junho and I had married the previous spring in a ceremony that made headlines in both business and society pages. Our relationship, rebuilt on recovered memories and genuine affection, was stronger than anything Nova's magic had tried to corrupt. He remembered everything now. Our first meeting, our early dates, the love letters he'd written that Nova had stolen and claimed. The years of false attraction to her seemed like a nightmare he'd finally awakened from. David, now 12 years old, was thriving beyond all expectations. His intelligence was remarkable, his health perfect, and his future unlimited. Jason brought him to the office sometimes, where the boy would pepper me with questions about business strategy and technological innovation. He had no memory of being sick, no idea that he carried within him the life force of a girl who died in bitter defeat. To him, I was simply Aunt Kira, the family friend who read him stories and taught him chess. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about what I'd done to Nova. Then I would remember her laugh as she described stealing my life, her cold satisfaction as she watched me bleed out on her floor, and the guilt would evaporate like morning mist. Justice wasn't always pretty, but it was always necessary. Standing at my office window, watching the city pulse with life and possibility, I reflected on the strange path that had brought me here. I'd been given the rarest of gifts, a chance to correct the worst betrayal imaginable. I'd use that chance not just for revenge, but for healing. David would live. Junho and I would build a life together based on true love rather than stolen memories. The business empire my parents had built would continue their legacy. And somewhere in the cosmic balance of the universe, Nova's dark deed had been answered with appropriate consequences. My assistant knocked on the door. "Mrs. Min, your husband is here for lunch." I smiled, still not quite used to my married name but loving the sound of it. "Send him in." Junho entered carrying takeout from our favorite restaurant, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Ready for a break from conquering the corporate world?" "Always," I said, moving away from the window to join him at the conference table, where we often shared meals and dreams for the future. As we unpacked our lunch, he asked about my day, my meetings, my plans for the quarterly board presentation. Normal questions from a loving husband, but I treasured them precisely because they were normal. In my first life, Nova had stolen even these simple domestic moments from me. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you," I said as we finished eating. "Jason's been talking about expanding into European markets. It would mean significant travel, months away from home." "Whatever you need to do," Junho replied immediately. "I believe in you, and I believe in what we're building together." We. Such a simple word, but one that carried the weight of everything I'd fought to reclaim. That evening, as I often did, I stopped by the Children's Hospital to visit current patients. I'd maintained my volunteer work even after achieving business success, partly as genuine charity and partly as a reminder of where my second chance had truly begun. David sometimes joined me for these visits, though he never fully understood why hospitals held such significance for me. Tonight, he was reading to a little girl with leukemia, his patient voice bringing comfort to another child facing an uncertain future. Watching him, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your choices have created lasting good in the world. David would grow up kind, generous, and strong. He would use Nova's stolen fortune to help others, never knowing where that impulse toward charity originated. The cycle of betrayal and theft was finally broken, replaced by healing and hope. As I prepared to leave, David looked up from his book. "Aunt Kira, the nurses say you've been volunteering here for years. Why is helping sick kids so important to you?" I knelt beside his chair, seeing in his healthy glow the miracle that had cost Nova everything and given me back my life. "Because sometimes people get second chances," I said. "And when they do, it's important to make sure those chances count." He nodded solemnly as if this made perfect sense to him, which in a way it did. The jade medallion no longer glowed around his neck. Its work was done, but its legacy lived on in every choice he made, every kindness he showed, every life he would touch. Walking home through Seoul's neon-lit streets, I thought about destiny and justice, about the prices we pay for the lives we want to live. I'd paid for my revenge with careful planning, strategic patience, and the willingness to use a cruel system against its creator. Nova had paid with everything she'd stolen and everything she was. The accounts were finally balanced. My phone buzzed with a text from Junho. "Dinner's ready when you get home. Love you." I smiled and quickened my pace. I had a life to live, my own life this time, built on truth instead of theft. And unlike my first chance, I intended to make every moment count. The girl who died betrayed and alone was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who understood that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was creation. I'd created a better world for David, a true love with Junho, a successful business that honored my parents' memory. I'd created a second chance worth dying for. And this time, I planned to live happily ever after.